Part of the Mormon religion in the 1800s was the practice of polygamy, and polygamy was marrying more than one wife at the same time. And it was started with Joseph Smith, and mostly it was kept a secret. He tried to keep it a secret as much as possible, but that was one of the reasons why people started leaving the church and were becoming very disgruntled with the church, is they didn't like that he was practicing polygamy. But there were a lot of other higher ups in the LDS church who were also living this lifestyle. By the time they got west, a lot more people in the LDS church were actually living this lifestyle. It wasn't just the people who were higher up in the LDS church. It was a lot of people who were practicing it. And in 1862, the United States government officially passed a law against polygamy in the United States, but it wasn't really well enforced. And it wasn't until 1882 that they tried it again. It was called the Edmunds Act, and the United States government passed another law against polygamy. This time trying to enforce it a little bit more, so they would actually send out federal marshals into the Western Territory of Utah to try and arrest people. And then it even got more stricter in 1887, 5 years later, with the Edmunds-Tucker Act. And with that particular act, it actually would put more people in jail. They would get fined more money, as well as the government now had the right to take away the LDS church's property, and they would have to pay, and the LDS people would have to pay rent to them if they wanted to use their own, what they would consider their own property, but now it had been confiscated or taken away by the United States government until they stopped living in polygamy. But in 1887, it was definitely more enforced. And in fact, it also took away women's suffrage, or what that means is it was the women's right to vote. Women in Utah Territory had the right to vote in the territorial legislature, in the voting within the Utah Territory. They couldn't vote within the United States because women did not have the right to vote in the United States. But Utah, within the Utah Territory, women did have that right. But in 1887, with the Edmunds-Tucker Act, that was actually taken away from women as well. So when they sent federal marshals out here, people would start hiding them. Now, not every LDS person was living in polygamy. Not every person did it, but there were a lot more people doing it than when it had first started. And so the US government sent people out here, police officers, these federal marshals, to come and arrest these people. And so a lot of the people who were not living in polygamy, the Mormons who were not living in polygamy, they would hide them. And this is one of the houses that they would hide them in St. George. This is the Seven Wives Inn, and it's called the Seven Wives Inn is because in 1873 this house was built, and up in the attics, the person who lived here, Mr. Woolley, he would hide polygamists in his house, in his attic, specifically someone who did have 7 wives, and so that's why it's called the Seven Wives Inn. But a lot of people, they would hide their polygamous friends, their Mormon polygamous friends. Now, some people who were not a fan of polygamy, specifically the non-LDS people in this area, and in all of Utah, but around in this area as well, they would actually turn their friends in. They were called, the polygamists were actually called cohabs, meaning cohabitation, meaning living with somebody else as a spouse. And so that was their nickname. They would call them cohabs before the term of cohabitation. And they would actually turn them in for $20. Each cohab, they would get $20. So they started turning them in, which in turn turned around a bit of a problem, because that means that now the LDS people could not trust their neighbors, whom they had trusted previously. They couldn't trust their neighbors, they couldn't trust the people around them. And that concept has actually stuck with the polygamous community now throughout the years. Now, the Mormon Church actually stopped practicing polygamy in 1890. Wilford Woodruff, the LDS president at the time, the leader of the LDS Church, he said that they were going to get rid of polygamy, and that was a really big thing. Now, that meant that they weren't just going to split up families at that point, but they were going to stop performing plural marriages. They were going to stop marrying so many women to men. And so they stopped, the LDS Church, mainstream LDS Church, stopped that. But the people who still wanted to practice that, and who felt like that was the lifestyle that was given to them by God, they continued that practice. Some of them moved to Canada, some of them moved to Mexico, some of them continued to live in Utah. They just went more into hiding. And that is actually where you get a lot of break-offs from the polygamous community, from the Mormon church. They broke off from the Mormon church and became this polygamous community. Now in St. George, you guys see a lot of it, more than anyone else in the United States sees, because you can tell that they are polygamous. The people that you see out in town that wear, the women who wear more of the old-fashioned dresses and they braid their hair in a certain way, and then the men who always have pants and long sleeve shirts on, even in the dead of summer here, those people are polygamous, and they live out on the border of Arizona and Utah, and they still are around today. And those people are the ones who branched off specifically from the LDS Church in 1890, and they are still around today. Polygamy is still an issue in Utah today, because we do have polygamists that are living on the border of Arizona and Utah, but we also have polygamists that live inside Utah, but you wouldn't know it because they're another branch of polygamists, and they don't dress differently. You wouldn't be able to tell from looking at them, because they keep their lives a secret. They keep their family lives a secret. They have normal jobs, so they just don't talk about their family life. But they dress like normal necessarily. Like you wouldn't be able to tell like you would from the polygamous group that does dress very more old-fashioned. You wouldn't be able to tell some of these groups of people. Now it is still an issue today, and when I say that, I mean that we still have laws in place right now that are cohabitation laws that are against polygamy. But it was just a couple of years ago that a lawsuit was brought against Utah to get rid of those cohabitation laws so that these polygamists could live the way that they wanted to live. And so the Utah was able to actually get rid of those cohabitation laws. But then in the court system, they had what's called a court of appeals, meaning they wanted to change the some people in Utah wanted to bring it to an appeals court to change the decision. And so a year later, that they actually won in appeals court, and it reversed the decision. So now polygamous, we still have cohabitation laws in place. We have laws against polygamy in place. But then just this year, we just still have a lot of court cases going on with polygamy. Just this year, they've been talking about how they want to deal with punishments of polygamy, if they want to tighten it, or if they want to like make them stricter, or if they want to make them a little bit less strict. So it is still something going on today, and it has been going on since the early mid-1800s, I guess, when we came here in 1847, but earlier, a little bit than that, with Joseph Smith bringing it forward into their religion. So polygamy is still an issue today, and it's been going on for a very long time. So it's still something that we see today in Utah. Specifically, you guys are the ones who see it the most, probably because you can tell that they are polygamous. But one of the major things about polygamy that is specific to Utah history is, well, polygamy in general is itself, but something that you definitely should recognize is that polygamy needed to be gone from the LDS Church in order for us to become a state. One of the reasons that we were denied becoming officially a part of the United States, the Utah Territory was officially continually was denied becoming a part of the United States officially, was because of polygamy. We were not obeying the laws, and it was the law, and they figured, if you're not going to obey the law as a territory, why would you as a state? Why would we want you to officially become a part of a state? So that was a major thing that we had to get rid of. And so that's why the LDS Church, they got rid of it in 1890. Yes, we still have pockets of polygamy in Utah. We still have them today, and we did then. But officially, they got rid of polygamy, and they were trying to obey the law so that we could become the state of Utah. So they did that in 1890, and then we had to do some other things to become a state. But we were officially made a state in 1896.